I do some consulting work on American
feeling in the room was
You
palpable.
don't ever say to her that
What about the shackle incident?
Introductory discussion on the ethical
We left.
more of a community.
We're trying to take back over.
Currently doing in autism.
Having the sex talks with your kids doesn't have to be scary or awkward and could save them from serious harm. Dr. Janet Rosenzweig is a research associate for Prevent Child Abuse America and author of the book The Sex-Wise Parent, The Parent's Guide to Protecting Your Child, Strengthening Your Family, and Talking to Kids About Sex, Abuse, and Bullying. She draws on her decades of experience in child abuse prevention, sexuality education, and family service to help you raise sexually safe and healthy children. We'll talk with her about the real threats to your child's safety, about helping kids set and hold boundaries, and about the importance of promoting empathy. Here's our conversation with Janet Rosenzweig. Janet Rosenzweig, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
You've been in the field of sex education and sex abuse prevention for 30 years now, and this past April you wrote a book, The Sex-Wise Parent. Tell us a little bit about the book.
I have a very firm belief that the most important gift a parent can give to their kid, if they want to keep them sexually safe and healthy, is information about how their bodies work, how the other gender body work. I really believe that lack of information about how our bodies work leaves a kid at risk to all kinds of problems with sexual health and safety, including predators.
You said that we're doing a lousy job in this country
Yes.
in terms of teaching our kids about
Yeah.
sex. And by we, you mean all of us,
Yes.
families, schools, religious groups, and others. So how do we put kids at risk by not talking to them about sex?
Let me say also that things didn't used to be quite this bad. I mean, I refer in the book to the neutered 90s, because prior to the 90s, kids got access to good sex information. Sex abuse prevention programs had a sexuality component, and sometime during the 90s, people started to rely on Megan's laws for sex abuse prevention, good touch, bad touch for sex abuse prevention. That stuff's important, but real prevention is kids understanding how their bodies work, having language about sex. That's the kind of stuff they need.
In fact, it was in the 90s when our Surgeon General, Jocelyn
Yes.
Elders, was fired
Yes.
because at an AIDS conference, she used the word masturbation.
Not only, someone asked her a question about her opinion of masturbation, and she answered a direct question. So here's this impeccably credentialed Surgeon General whose career is derailed because she answered a question. Grown-ups, even the most well-meaning grown-ups, stopped talking to kids about sex in the 90s, and now that generation are the parents. They need the tools, they need the resources to be able to talk to their own kids.
Well, the good news is you say it's never too late, and it's also never too early to have this talk. In fact, it's not a talk at all. It's a series of talks.
Yeah. Yes, it's parents being in a position to treat every part of their body, of a kid's body, as an important part of the kid's body. We don't skip from our knees to our belly buttons when we're teaching the kids the name of our body parts. We have a family where when the 18-month-old can say, "This is my nose," we're happy. Well, when he can say, "This is my penis," we're also happy and not embarrassed. We're normalizing every part of the body so the child is comfortable talking with the parent.
And you say a child who doesn't have appropriate language for their body parts is at risk. A predator can make them feel shamed.
There's a lot of reasons why the lack of language puts them at risk. First and foremost, if the kid doesn't have language for what's happening, he or she can't tell. And I interviewed predators, I interviewed pedophiles when I was doing the book. I treated pedophiles earlier in my career. They look for that. They want a kid who's who's much less likely to be able to tell or to be believed if they do. So if the kid doesn't have words, that's one thing. But more important, and this is, to me, this is the soapbox that as a sex educator that I have to get up on a soapbox. Kids need to understand that their body will react to stimuli in very specific ways and that it's a reflex. And pedophiles and guys that go after adolescents, they bank on the fact that the kid is not going to know that and assume that their body's response means that the kid wasn't a victim.
You write in your book, there's a chapter where you talk about Oprah Winfrey's program where she
Yeah.
interviewed men who had been abused as
Yes.
boys. And Tyler Perry talks about the fact that his body betrayed him because of this autonomic response that you were just talking about, which resulted in self-loathing.
That brings tears to my eyes, because when we talk about primary prevention, right, we prevent something with an inoculation, right? We prevent the flu, we get a flu shot. We can inoculate our kids against the kind of confusion that literally can take away a guy or a woman's mental health just by arming them with the simple fact of how the bodies work. And that's a gift that any parent is in a position to give to a kid.
So you weren't complicit. These young boys were not complicit just because their bodies responded.
Or girls, right? We can talk about like older kids where, the sexual response issue becomes more of an issue for like the young adolescents, young girls that are the objects of predatory teachers. And every time I'm out with a group and I talk about school climate and sexual abuse in schools, I've never been in a group where at least one person didn't say everyone knew there was a teacher having sex with the kids in the school. There's a report put out by the Federal Department of Education that estimates at least 5% of all kids have a sexual contact with somebody in an educational institution. So with the older kids, we're more concerned about them mistaking lust and sexual arousal for the fact that they really have feelings for this inappropriate person. Yes.
You mentioned assessing a school's sexual climate.
Yes.
How do you do that?
Well, I actually have a checklist in the book, and it's also up on my website. So I want people to have this information. A couple of things we want to look at. We want to look at how the school deals with sexual issues anywhere they show up. Sexual issues come up in art, they come up in history, they come up in health, they come up in anatomy. How are we handling all of the sexual issues? How does the school handle things as simple as walking through hallways? I mean, I've heard instances where kids or girls are so uncomfortable walking through crowded hallways, where boys have a game where they get points for which girl's breasts they touch in a crowded hallway. If people know that's going on, right, do they take steps to make it safer? Is there graffiti? Do we get rid of the sexually suggestive graffiti? The list really can go on.
Well, that brings me to the sexualization of girls. And I'm just wondering how damaging that is, because it seems to me that young girls today have to feel so hurried to grow up.
And boys, I want to be clear, it's more obvious with girls, but boys are also getting messages that are very difficult to digest about what it means to be a boy or a man, and to be a tough guy at a younger age. The key thing that parents can do is reinforce to their daughters the value that they have that goes way beyond the sexuality, that we are reinforcing their intellect, we're reinforcing their strength. I mean, God bless Title IX, right? I mean, I can remember before Title IX when girls weren't involved
and what sports
with it.
means, right?
And now, we're developing these strong, healthy, competitive leader women, young women, because they had the opportunity to participate in sports. So as well as playing down the sexualization, with parenting, it's much easier to encourage what you want than to try to get
Discourage
rid of
what you don't want, right.
So just encourage all that other positive stuff with our kids.
Well, parents don't seem to realize that they are the most powerful influence on their kids' sexuality.
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. National study after national study will consistently show us that when you ask a child to rate who's got influences on their sexuality, their behaviors, their decisions about sexual behavior, parents rank higher than friends, right? So kids rate their parents as the highest, most influential factor in their decisions about sex, and they also say in surveys they wish their parents would give them more, would talk to them more. Yet if you ask a parent, they rate themselves low. So if parents listening or watching take away nothing, let them remember that you have way more influence on your kids' decisions about sex than they're going to tell you or that you believe.
And you say that parents can use the news to get these conversations started. And the news, when we think about the news, the Catholic Church scandal, the Sandusky scandal, the Boy Scouts, the British TV host Jimmy Savile, the revered Horace Mann School in the Bronx. It's endless.
Yes, and parents can use the news to make it clear what I want my kid to know and what my family's values are, right? So what I want, when these kind of cases come up of the abuse, that opens the door, depending on our kids' age, we should start with the little kids with the very simple questions like, what do you think happened? Like if you're, and you might get some really odd answer out of the mouth of a 6-year-old, and that's a parent's opportunity to clarify what really did happen and use that to say that this is what our family's values are about sexuality, what our family wants you to know about your body and your boundaries. So it's a great place to start.
These high-profile cases have resulted in you really traveling the country, giving workshops and that sort of thing. How has these tragedies changed the national conversation?
Well, and I really have to commend Penn State, because the national conference that was hosted here really went a long way to doing that, and I really appreciated being part of that. One of the things that it's really done, and this came out several times at the conference here, is that we can't think about sex abuse as just looking one way. I use the analogy to cancer. 25 years ago, people heard the word cancer and they thought of one disease. Now we know it's everything from keratosis to melanoma and everything in between. Well, the public is getting the same concept now about child sex abuse. It doesn't look just one way. It's not just teenage girls and stepfathers or boys and coaches. It can look many, many different ways. So the conversation is now about promoting your child's overall sexual health and safety.
Well, I'm not sure how people can reconcile what they see in the news with the fact that research shows that sexual abuse is steadily declining, that it's perhaps down by 60% in the last 2 decades.
Yeah, and every statistician or sociologist studying this issue is saying that the numbers are going down. They urge the prevention people to stand up and take credit because some programs really are working. So a piece of the decline has to be due to that. But definitions have changed over time. It depends on which state's definitions you look at. And an awful lot of the kind of sex abuse that we're hearing about now, that's starting to come out now, would not have ever been counted in those statistics. Monica Lewinsky. People hear the name Monica Lewinsky. She was never in any statistic. She learned to have sex with married men from a high school teacher, right? She's not in a statistic. Mackenzie Phillips, she's not in any statistic. Tyler Perry was never in any statistic. So we're hearing about cases that never would have met any of the definitions the statisticians look at.
And you said that Pennsylvania's definition of sex abuse is different from a lot of states.
Yes, the definitions that are used by state child protection systems are set by the state. So what might be considered reportable in New Jersey, for example, might not be reportable in Pennsylvania. So overall, the statisticians will tell us the decline is so large, we have to accept there's been some decline. So as a prevention person, I'm very thankful. But to put our heads in the sand and assume that there's not work to be done, that would be tragic.
No, you said the word reportable, and I'm wondering to what extent all of these cases have made people more willing to report. A parent on behalf of a child or an adult who was the victim in childhood.
I'm all for that, but I want to be real clear that I almost think it's wrong to encourage reporting until we've beefed up the systems to be able to do something really, really good when we receive the report. And the legal system certainly is in a position to prosecute, but let's also make sure that we've got the support systems in place to support these victims and the collateral damage that's going to happen in their lives when they come out. So just to encourage reporting is the tip of the iceberg. I get very nervous when people just think that encouraging reporting is the end of their job. You've got to have a big, comprehensive system.
Because if you report, you need help.
Yes, and not just the prosecution. Yes, that's important. We want to make sure the bad folks get prosecuted, but you've got to have clinical and social support systems to help the people making the report kind of live through what's going to happen next.
You mentioned earlier that you worked with pedophiles, that you interviewed pedophiles for this book.
Yeah.
Can pedophiles be cured?
One of the presenters at the conference here did some fabulous work, and the important thing for us to know is that pedophiles aren't all the same kind of person. There's certain people who abuse kids who've got a much, much higher probability of being amenable to treatment. There's some that we know probably aren't. The key is to have a system in place where people are comfortable with differential diagnosis. And that's politically difficult because even the best differential diagnoses, are going to make a mistake once in a while. And even if you're wrong 1 out of 1,000 times, if that one person hurts another child, your whole system gets knocked down. There were communities that did that, particularly in California in the 70s and 80s. You get one high-profile misdiagnosis, and those systems go away.
It's interesting because I was reading about a teacher at the Horace Mann School in the Bronx. Last name was Lynn. And he said that what he did, he had sex with many of his students, he did out of warmth and respect, and that it was never a power play, and that he was very sorry if he hurt anybody.
So here's where I get upset with the sound of the word grooming, right? Everyone's talking about grooming. Let's call this what it is. It's seduction. And that's what this man is saying. I love these people. I had feelings for these people. So I seduced these people, and it resulted in sex. You don't get to seduce a minor, period. They are developmentally and legally incapable of giving consent. And that's the piece that people try to dress this stuff up and give it other names. It is just not okay to seduce a minor, period.
What seemed interesting about that particular person, though, was his willingness to say, I'm sorry, and to admit it. Because lots of pedophiles don't admit it.
Well,
Or is that my assumption?
No. Well, one of the issues there is what a therapist call accepting of responsibility, which makes one of the keys that we look at to see if someone's treatable. A prosecutor calls a confession. Right, so one of the reasons many pedophiles don't admit it is because there's not going to be any other evidence if they don't, right? If they didn't leave physical evidence on the child, if the child is not a very good witness, one of the reasons pedophiles don't own up is because
it's used against them in the court of law.
And that's, some of those 1980s style plea bargaining where if you own up and you're considered your diagnosis being amenable to treatment, everybody wins, but one slip, one mistake, and those programs tend to disappear.
Now, you said a couple of things in your book that I think are really worth passing on to parents if they don't read the book, and that is help kids set and hold boundaries, and help kids learn to be assertive.
Yes. That there's a difference between being assertive and aggressive. Aggressive means I'm just going after you. Assertive means I'm taking care of me. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. We want to teach our kids that. We want to teach our kids that they don't have to kiss the relatives that smell funny, that they don't want to kiss. And if that's an issue in your family, negotiate an alternative. We have to respect our kids' rights.
Give them high fives, but not a kiss.
Yes, or shake hands, but kids, we have
a right to say they don't want to kiss Uncle Joe.
And to recognize other kids' boundaries. And some of the kids, even if you notice on the playground, the one aggressive kid that doesn't respect other kids' boundaries on a playground, that might be the same kid that's not going to respect other kids' boundaries when he gets to be a teenager. And one thing as the mom of a son, I never want my son to be in a position of being accused of date rape. Right, so I'm a protective mom. I want a boy to know that girls have to be able to set boundaries, and you have to know what they are.
You said the only thing worse than having a child who is bullied is having a child who is the bully.
Yeah, yes.
So how does a parent kind of figure out that they've raised a kid who's a bully, a boy or girl?
Well, kids, probably the most important thing we can do to raise a kid who's not going to be dangerous is to teach empathy. The goal, I don't want to sound oversimplify things, but teaching our kids the golden rule is just a wonderful.
Do unto others.
Yes, as you would have them do unto you. As early as we can, we want to teach our kids that what they do causes a feeling or reaction in the other person. And as simple as that seems to us as healthy grown-ups, a lot of kids don't get that.
Kids aren't born with, I would call that emotional intelligence.
Correct. And I can actually recall in my days as a therapist working with incest dads who truly didn't get the amount of pain that their behavior had caused to their victims, right? And if we could start teaching our kids at the youngest possible age to think about how your behavior is going to affect the other people you interact with, we're giving our kid a gift, our family a gift, and our community a gift.
You also write in your book about siblings.
Yeah.
You call it, this particular chapter, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yes.
Because some of the problems in terms of sex abuse that's most unreported is related to siblings.
And since I've been out talking about the book, the number of people that have come up to me afterwards, like at a book signing, to disclose sibling abuse is extraordinary. In all socioeconomic levels, it's extraordinary. One woman actually shared with me that when she confronted her brother as a grown-up, he laughed and he said, yeah, that was pretty stupid. And so to the brother, he was acting out whatever he was acting out and just blew it off when he was done. This woman is still carrying it with her 25 years later. So teaching our kids to respect boundaries, parents really understanding that when, especially adolescent boys, when their hormones hit, behaviors that caused absolutely no physical response, tickling, wrestling, cuddling, all of a sudden do. And if they don't understand what's going on, they may act on it without even thinking. And it's not that they're a predator who's out to molest somebody, it's their body did something, they didn't understand what it was, and they reacted. And so some of the sibling stuff we see starts out as horseplay that would have been fine when you're 4 and 5 crosses a line when you're 13 and 14.
This goes back to how inadequate sex education that revolves around Megan's Law really is.
Yes, yes. Or thinking that our job as a parent is done when we tell our kids where babies come from, right? A gift that we could give our kids, again, is helping them understand the autonomic arousal. It's just what your body does. And as they get older, understanding the difference between lust and love, right? Keeps our teenagers out of stupid relationships. You know, I mean, lust, well, that's cool, but it doesn't mean love, right? You don't have to do anything with that lust. And helping, you know, when a young, particularly a young boy, experiences arousal, to understand it's nobody's problem but his.
One of the other things you say in your book that I think is worth repeating, sex in the right context is beautiful. So while you're talking to your kids about sex, you don't want to, because I think of the abstinence only movement where parents thought, if I talk about sex, I'm in essence giving them permission to have sex. And of course, that's not it at all.
No, and what we, when we have our first conversations with our kids about sex in the context of sex abuse prevention or understanding these high-profile cases in the media, we're missing the point that when two grown-ups love each other, sex is the highest form of showing your love. And if we can communicate that to our kids and they know that in the right context, we want you to be sexually safe and healthy. We want you to enjoy a grown-up sex life when you earn the right to have one, which you haven't earned at your tender age of 14, right? You haven't earned a driver's license. You haven't earned the right to be sexually active yet. It's a right that you have to earn when you're smart and you're prepared. And then it's a fabulous gift.
You started your career. The first thing you did was work on a sex abuse hotline.
Yeah.
My guess is that there are still phone calls that you just can't forget.
You're absolutely right. And probably the thing that stayed with me the longest was working over the phone and developing a relationship with a young girl, a junior high school girl, until she finally gave me enough identifying information to track her down. So I called my partner in child protection. The two of us walked into the school. You know, he had the license, the ID. We asked to see this young woman. And the school secretary looked at us and said, "Is this because of what her uncle's been doing to her?" Oh. How many times was this child raped again because the school nurse hadn't picked up the phone and made, I mean, the secretary. And I mean, this is like the late 70s. How many years ago is that? And I still choke at the memory of having a school person say, "Is this because of what her uncle's been doing to her?"
Now, you've been at this for 30 years. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing kids today? What would you like to see parents, or what needs to change?
What needs to change is putting the human sexuality, the accurate information about human sexuality back into how loving, healthy, educated grown-ups deal with kids. We can't let the fear of ending up like Jocelyn Elders keep professionals from doing their jobs. We can't let the fear of having a kid go home and tell mommy, I heard the teacher say the word penis in school today, keep health teachers from using the word penis. We've got to walk that middle line of saying, those of us that care about kids, those of us that don't want kids to be susceptible to the lies told to them by molesters, we have to be able to talk to kids. Now, whether or not that should be done in schools, that's a political issue, and districts need to decide with input from their parents. I wrote my book because it's got to start at home. Parents need to have the tools they need to give this gift to their kids.
All right. Thank you, Janet Rosenzweig. Thank you so much for talking with us.
Thank you for having me.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Janet Rosenzweig. Comcast subscribers can watch this program anytime on Penn State On Demand. Find out how through our website, conversations.psu.edu, where you'll also find an excerpt from Rosenzweig's book, The Sex-Wise Parent. I'm Patty Satalia. We hope you'll join us for our next Conversation from Penn State.
If you've enjoyed Conversations from Penn State and would like to purchase a DVD of this show or any of our other episodes, order online at mediasales.psu.edu or call 1-800-770-2111.
Production funding provided in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by viewers like you. Thank you. This has been a production of WPSU.